Master Chief, with all due respect, the grown-ups are running the show up here. Your station is below decks. We don't need a glorified mechanic cluttering the CIC, the crowd of junior officers, a sea of starched khaki and nervous ambition, offered a ripple of sycophantic laughter. They stood in the blue-hued heart of the USS Vengeance, the Combat Information Center, a room that thrummed with the latent power of a carrier strike group. In this cathedral of digital warfare, Lieutenant Commander Thorne was the high priest, and he had just designated his sacrifice. But Master Chief Evelyn Reed offered no reaction. Her face, framed by a severe bun of graying hair, remained a mask of placid neutrality. She didn't look at Thorne. She didn't acknowledge the laughter. Her focus was entirely on the small, non-standard diagnostic tablet in her hands, its screen reflecting a cascade of raw system code that was gibberish to everyone else in the room. Her silence was not one of submission. It was a profound, dense quiet, the kind found in the crushing depths of the ocean or the vacuum of space. It was the silence of absolute competence, a language Thorne was utterly incapable of understanding. But from the elevated flag bridge, watching on a silent video feed, Admiral Callahan saw her stance. He saw the way her fingers rested on the tablet, not with uncertainty, but with the innate familiarity of a concert pianist. He saw the stillness in her posture, a stillness that wasn't passive but coiled, ready. The Admiral leaned forward, a flicker of recognition in his old, weary eyes. If you believe true authority is earned in silence, not shouted from a pedestal, type competence below. The air in the CIC was thick with Thorne's arrogance. He paced before the main tactical plot, a grand projection showing friendly and neutral contacts, a clean and orderly representation of the fleet's domain. Exercise Sea Dragon is a test of command and control, he announced, his voice booming with unearned authority. It is about our Aegis system, the most advanced shield in naval history, acting as one seamless weapon. It is about trusting the system. He cast a pointed glare toward Reed, who was now methodically connecting a custom interface cable from her tablet to a shielded auxiliary port on the main combat console. It is not about rewiring the ship like it's a broken toaster, more nervous chuckles. Reed ignored him. Her movements were economical, precise, each action flowing into the next without a single wasted gesture. She wore the standard Navy working uniform, but hers was different in subtle ways. It was perfectly tailored yet faded from countless washes, bearing no superfluous patches, only the stark insignia of her rank, a fouled anchor with 2 silver stars. To Thorne, she looked like a relic, a holdover from an analog era who had no place in his digital battle space. He saw a maintenance technician, a fixer of hardware, someone to be summoned when things broke, not someone to stand among the decision-makers. His prejudice was a wall, preventing him from seeing the truth, that her hands, now calibrating her interface, had personally written half the combat code he so proudly commanded. Her silence continued to absorb his insults, rendering them impotent, a fact that only served to stoke his frustration. He saw insubordination where there was only focus. He saw disrespect where there was only a professional preparing for a storm he couldn't even imagine. The storm broke without warning. A synthesized voice, devoid of emotion, sliced through the CIC. Vampire, vampire, vampire. Multiple inbound, bearing 095 on the main plot. The clean, orderly space erupted in a swarm of angry red icons, each representing a sea-skimming missile traveling at Mach 3. They were closing the distance with terrifying speed. Thorne snapped into action, his voice sharp with practice commands. Engage. Spy 1 acquire and track. Link data across the net. Authorize SM-3 launch. For a moment, the system responded. Blue icons representing defensive missiles launched from the Vengeance and its escorts, streaking toward the inbound threats. But then, the unthinkable happened. The screen flickered. A wave of digital static washed over the tactical plot, and a new voice announced. Warning, sensor network degraded. Warning, fire control offline. The red icons vanished, replaced by ghost signals and false targets. The enemy wasn't just attacking. They were using sophisticated electronic warfare to blind the entire strike group. The Aegis system, the impenetrable shield, was having a catastrophic nervous breakdown. Thorne's face went pale. "What's happening? Give me a solution. Reroute fire control," he yelled, his voice cracking with the first notes of panic. His officers frantically tried to follow his orders, but they were punching at ghosts. The system they had been taught to trust implicitly had abandoned them. The calm, orderly cathedral of war had descended into a cacophony of alarms and panic shouts. In the midst of the chaos, one island of absolute calm remained. Master Chief Evelyn Reed. As alarms blared and men shouted, her hands became a blur of motion across her tablet and the console's keyboard. She wasn't fighting the system. She was communing with it. Her fingers moved with a speed and certainty that was hypnotic, typing lines of override code directly into the system's core kernel. She wasn't using the graphical interface the other officers were helplessly clicking. She was in the machine's soul, speaking its native language. On a secondary monitor that only she was watching, raw data streams from every ship in the strike group scrolled past. Where the main system saw only jamming and chaos, she saw patterns. She saw the faint electronic echoes of the real missiles hidden within the noise. Her expression never changed. Her breathing remained slow and steady. This was not a crisis to her. It was simply a complex problem requiring a precise solution. With a final series of keystrokes, she bypassed the entire automated threat assessment matrix. She manually linked the spy, one radar from the Vengeance, to the fire control system of a destroyer 10 miles to the east, then slaved the vertical launch system of a cruiser to the south to a targeting solution derived from an E-2 Hawkeye's raw data feed. She was no longer just a technician. She was the central nervous system of the entire fleet, a human processor operating at the speed of light. Then, for the first time, she spoke, her voice cutting through the din with unnerving clarity, broadcast over the command channel. "Vengeance, manual override engaged. Firing solution 1, locked. Salvo away." The aftermath was a deafening silence. On the main tactical plot, which had miraculously cleared of static the moment Reed spoke, a series of blue icons intercepted the last of the red threats, blossoming into symbols that indicated a successful kill. Every single missile had been destroyed. The exercise was over. The strike group was in simulation, saved. The cacophony of alarms ceased, replaced by a profound, echoing quiet in the CIC. The junior officers stood frozen at their stations, their faces a mixture of shock and awe. They turned, one by one, away from their now responsive consoles and toward the unassuming Master Chief. Thorne stood paralyzed, his mouth slightly agape, staring at the clean screen where moments before his career had been flashing before his eyes. "Ow," he whispered, the single word a testament to his shattered reality. That's not possible. He had witnessed something that defied his entire understanding of naval doctrine. An enlisted sailor, a mechanic, had single-handedly wielded the power of an entire strike group's combat systems, not through established procedure, but through what looked like pure digital witchcraft. He looked at Reed, who was now calmly running a diagnostic to assess the electronic warfare's impact on the system architecture, her work already moving on to the next phase. She hadn't done it for glory. She hadn't done it to show him up. She had done it because it was necessary, and she was the only one there who could. The silence stretched, thick with the weight of what they had all just seen. It was the silence of impossibility made real. Into that silence strode Admiral Callahan. He entered the CIC not with a storm of anger, but with the quiet gravity of a celestial body, his presence warping the room around him. The crew snapped to attention. Callahan's eyes, however, were fixed on only one person. He walked past the pale and trembling Lieutenant Commander Thorne without a word, without even a glance, as if the man were nothing more than a piece of equipment. He stopped directly in front of Reed's console. She looked up from her work, her expression unchanged, and simply met his gaze. The admiral, a man who commanded fleets and conversed with presidents, looked at the Master Chief, and a slow smile of recognition spread across his face. "I should have known Aegis Prime was on board," he said, his voice a low rumble of respect that carried across the hushed room. He turned to face the stunned collection of officers. "Gentlemen," he began, his voice now ringing with the cold steel of command, "let me introduce you to Master Chief Evelyn Reed." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "She is not a mechanic. She is the lead architect and senior enlisted developer for the Aegis combat system, Block V, and 6 upgrades. She didn't just learn the system, she built it. The code that you trust your lives to? A significant portion of it originated in her mind. The electronic warfare countermeasures that just saved your collective hides in this simulation? She wrote them last year, after war gaming this exact scenario. He let that revelation hang in the air, a devastating indictment of their prejudice. Then, in a gesture that sent a shock wave through the room, the 4-star admiral squared his shoulders and rendered a crisp, formal salute to the enlisted sailor. "Master Chief," he said, his voice imbued with absolute authority, "the bridge is yours. From this point forward, for the duration of this exercise, nothing moves without her call." The story of what happened in the CIC of the USS Vengeance spread through the fleet like a plasma fire. It was whispered in mess decks, recounted in ready rooms, and debated in the officers' wardroom. They called her Ghost in the Machine, the quiet Master Chief who could speak directly to the soul of the fleet's weapon systems. The legend grew with each telling. Some said she never blinked during the entire engagement. Others swore they saw lines of code literally streaming from her fingertips. The narrative was always the same. In the moment of ultimate crisis, when rank and protocol failed, a quiet professional with unparalleled competence had saved them all. Lieutenant Commander Thorne became a footnote in her story, a cautionary tale about the dangers of arrogance. He was not formally reprimanded. The public humiliation was deemed sufficient. The next day, he was seen approaching Reed's station, not with a command, but with a humble offering of a fresh cup of coffee. He quietly asked if she would be willing to walk his junior officers through the override protocol she had invented on the fly. He spoke to her with a deference that bordered on reverence, his previous swagger completely extinguished. Reed, in her typical fashion, simply nodded and said, "Yes, sir." After I complete the system patch, she held no grudge. For her, it was never personal. It was about the integrity of the system and the mission's success. Her focus remained, as always, on the work. This transformation was the most powerful part of the legend. It wasn't just about a hero's victory. It was about an antagonist's redemption through humility. Thorne, having been confronted with the undeniable truth of his own ignorance, chose to learn rather than lash out. He became Reed's most ardent student, ensuring that every officer under his command understood that the name on a uniform meant less than the knowledge in the head. The override procedure Reed had created in those frantic seconds was formalized, studied at the Naval War College, and eventually integrated into official doctrine. It was given a name, the Reed Contingency. It became the ultimate manual backup, a testament to the fact that even in the most advanced digital systems, the final, most critical component is the well-trained human mind. A photograph taken by a quick-thinking ensign, showing the 4-star admiral saluting the Master Chief in the heart of the CIC, was quietly framed and hung in the entrance to the Aegis Training and Readiness Center in Dahlgren, Virginia. There was no caption beneath it. None was needed. Every sailor and officer who walked past knew the story. It was a permanent, silent reminder that competence recognizes no rank but its own, and that true respect is a current that flows not down, but towards demonstrated excellence. The event became a part of the Navy's institutional memory, a modern myth with a vital lesson. Years passed. On the bridge of a brand-new Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, a newly commissioned ensign stood his first watch in the CIC. The room was more advanced, the screens brighter, the systems faster, but the core principles remained the same. His training officer, a seasoned lieutenant, was walking him through the complex console. The lieutenant pointed to a small, unassuming data port near the bottom of the main tactical station, sealed with a heavy-duty, tamper-proof red cover. "You see that?" the lieutenant asked. "That's the read port. You'll learn about it at the academy, but I want you to see it for real. It's a direct hardware link to the core combat kernel. It bypasses all the standard user interfaces. You are never, ever to touch it unless you are specifically ordered to by Fleet Command." The ensign looked at the port with a sense of awe. "Is it true, sir? The story about Master Chief Reed?" The lieutenant leaned against the console, his expression serious. "Every word," he said. "She'd save an entire strike group from this very chair, with nothing but a custom tablet and a calm heart. She reminded the whole Navy that our greatest weapon isn't the missiles or the radars. It's the people, the quiet professionals who spend their entire careers mastering their craft, who don't need praise or recognition, who just do the work." He paused, letting the young officer absorb the weight of that legacy. "Remember that ensign. The loudest voice on the bridge is often the most insecure. Look for the quiet ones. Look for the ones whose hands are steady when everyone else is panicking. Trust competence, not collar devices. That's the lesson of the read port. True legacy isn't what you leave behind in a service record. It's the standard that continues forward in others." The ensign stared at the simple red cover, understanding that it was more than just a piece of hardware. It was a monument. It was a symbol of a philosophy, a silent promise that in the Navy, what ultimately mattered was not who you were supposed to be, but what you could do when the lights went out and everything was on the line. The story of Master Chief Evelyn Reed was no longer just a story. It had become an integral part of the system, a ghost of competence hardwired into the fleet itself, ensuring her silent professionalism would echo through generations of sailors to come. For more stories where quiet competence triumphs over loud assumption and where steadfast professionalism defines their worth, subscribe to Unknown Heroine Stories.